this weekend, the Hulk experience continues, and if you've ever ridden that roller coaster at Universal Studios, you know it's a lot of fun, but for Ion Cutelaba and his bank account, it's been anything but that. He takes on Kennedy Nzechukwu coming up this weekend, and for Nzechukwu, he's been on a tidy little run in his last 5 fights, and we'll discuss both of these guys' recent results, but this really is a fun fight because for Nzechukwu, you knew exactly what you could have at a certain point when you saw him on Dana White's Contender Series the first time. This guy has such a large frame for the division. If he could figure out that mix of the power with the length and the range, he could really go far, and this is his great opportunity. For him, his last time out against Carl Robertson, I mean, they didn't belong in the same octagon. It didn't seem. For Nzechukwu in the last 5 fights, you look at the wins that he has. A win over Carlos Ulberg by finish, withstood a heavy storm, came out the other side. Danilo Marquez withstood the heavy grappling storm early until Marquez got tired, finished him. Took on Daeun Jung and did not respond to the power very well. Lost a split decision to Nikolai Negumereanu. And in that fight now, fellow teammate of Ion Cutelaba at Extreme Couture, so they can exchange notes and have a little bit of fun there. But for Kennedy, he lost the point really early on in that fight, and even if he didn't, he probably should have won that fight. So his last time out against Robertson, very impressive that he was able to finish them, especially down and dirty like he did. And for Ion Cutelaba, the last 5 fights, as just a sample size, a loss to Magomed Ankalaev. That was the second one. There was no worries about that one. A split decision or a split draw against Dustin Jacoby, 10-8 first round, and then he didn't have the cardio in the second and third rounds. He beats Devin Clark by decision, completely out-wrestled him, and looked amazing on the mat. He lost to Ryan Spann by submission, where he just looked like, not a fish out of water, but I say this with respect. He was just kind of floating everywhere, all over, being super, unorthodox. And as he runs in to try and get the takedown, Ryan Spann just cranks and gets him into the submission. And then, of course, Cutelaba's last time out takes on Johnny Walker. And apparently, all they do at SBG is train ground fighting, and Johnny Walker is a submission specialist. So that was a giant surprise of a loss for Cutelaba, more so than any of his other fights that we've seen so far.
Without a doubt, because if you thought Cutelaba had any one area of his game that he'd be able to go to have success, it would probably be the offensive wrestling.
That was why I took him to beat Johnny Walker, and didn't I look like a schmuck?
I thought, okay, Walker might not be the best point of his career. There's a good chance he could win this fight, but we're probably going to see a crazy flying knee, one of those classic Johnny Walker performances. To Walker's credit, though, and this is what you have to do. Give Johnny Walker the credit. Don't discredit Ion Cutelaba. Walker was able to show us a part of his game that we had yet to see against high-level competition. It was extremely impressive to see him go out there and get a submission. But it was also a little disappointing to see Cutelaba struggle in the one area against a fighter who has never really shown that to be a strength of his. And for Cutelaba, I'm going to be curious to see how aggressive he is in this fight, because we're kind of joking around before we started filming. Cutelaba is always going to look good in a couple areas, but there's always going to be that one thing where he leaves you wanting more, that kind of final missing puzzle piece, because sometimes he'll have decent cardio when he doesn't throw his power punches. Sometimes he has terrible cardio when he does throw his power punches. But I gotta be honest, and maybe this is a bit of a zag, I like the former aggressive version of Cutelaba a little bit more than the slow burn version that we've got as of late. I know that Cutelaba is more well-rounded than anybody gives him credit for, because everybody just thinks, oh, the Hulk, he's gonna go in there and throw power shots. And yes, to a certain degree, you are correct. But Cutelaba is a good offensive grappler. He's dynamic on the mat. The problem is, it's almost like he doesn't really realize what version of himself he should be in a lot of these fights, and that's what's so great about this fight in general, I think. For Kennedy, he also kind of has that on and off switch, but what I like out of Kennedy, and you had mentioned it, he has such a unique skill set for his frame in this division. He has good cardio, but he's massive, he's very long and rangy, has good power sometimes when he sits down on his shots, but again, for Kennedy, he's a guy who really thrives in that long range, and against a guy like Ion Cutelaba, who can struggle at finding his entries with his own power shots, Kennedy could have a lot of success, but the flip side is, once guys do get on the inside of that range, make it ugly on him, mix in their wrestling, or at least their clinch work with their own striking, guys can start to get towards them and start landing their own shots, because even though we beat Carlos Ulberg, you kind of forgot about how we got to that finish. Carlos Ulberg was beating him up pretty bad for the first few minutes of that fight, landing big power shots, and it was just that Kennedy is so durable, he was able to weather that big storm, get to the other side, and show off some of his unique skill sets. I just think this is a really fun fight between two guys who I think do have high ceilings, but they both desperately need this win if they want to maintain the relevance.
And I mean, Nzechukwu's biggest fight that he's had just happens to be his UFC debut against Paul Craig. If we're talking about the divisional rankings and the relevance that it has to the matchup, I mean, for Nzechukwu, that is a guy. And for Ion Cutelaba, I'd say, His win over Khalil Roundtree, or possibly even Devin Clark. I mean, the losses to Ankalaev, you have to think at a certain point Ankalaev will most likely fight for a title in the next year. I'm going to say that. So for Iwan, yeah, those are tough losses against a tall, long, rangy striker who throws some really good kicks. So we'll see how this one plays out. But style for style, and Nzechukwu can kind of mold himself to the fight that's brought to him. Cutelaba doesn't really do well under those pressures, those same pressures. When somebody starts to bring their own brand of fight to him, he can kind of struggle and change his game plan as the fight goes on.
But that's why I like this fight so much. Kennedy's style of fight is accept what's given to him and then retaliate with his own. That means he's going to face the big storm from Cutelaba early in this fight, and that's why I do think this is one of those fights where if Cutelaba wins, it's probably going to be by knockout early, because we have seen Kennedy face power punchers who do start to decline, especially if they've been throwing power punches early, and if Cutelaba does find himself being that huffing and puffing striker who is reaching for some of his takedowns, because that is the one thing with Cutelaba, when he has full cardio, his takedowns are quite explosive. They do get labored as the fight continues though, and I think that's one area that Kennedy can have a lot of success in, if he is able to at least weather that big storm. But again, we're asking you to just eat power shots from a guy like Ion Cutelaba, who like 3 years ago was thought of as like the boogeyman of this division.
I mean, just finishing Khalil Roundtree with elbows and mount, now ranked Khalil Roundtree. So you look at the odds in this matchup. Cutelaba, well, they both open up par. He's now the underdog, plus 140. And Nzechukwu now at a minus 170. We'll have a look at the fan vote. Surprise to us, it is to you over on Topology. I'm going to say over under. I guess if Nzechukwu's that big of a favorite, I'll say over under 65% Kennedy Nzechukwu.
I think it'll be over.
It's under, but it's close. So 520 total votes, 66% Nzechukwu, 78% by knockout. For the 34% that have Cutelaba, 61% by knockout. So most people see a finish, most people see a knockout. Who's it going to be for, I guess?
I think if the fight's not absolutely terrible, we will get a finish. Like, I think if both guys aren't just so hesitant about their opponent's power, we probably will get a finish. Because if Cutelaba does go in there and have the best chance of success that I think he does, which is really rough up Nzechukwu, make him think, especially early on, and make him feel your power early, then Cutelaba's not going to be there in round 2 and round 3 to really withstand the storm if Kennedy's able to get past it. So I think this is a really fun fight just because it could go any which way. I guess I will favor the cardio of Kennedy in this matchup. Here's the thing, too. I think his grappling defense has gotten better throughout his UFC tenure.
Like, if you consider Cutelaba and compare him to the now recently heavyweight, wasn't it heavyweight title challenger? Light heavyweight title challenger over at KSW, Darko Stosic. Stosic was able to close the distance, go again and again and again, and there's a lot of similarities between those two guys, but if you look at that fight, and then the Marquez fight, and then the fight against Nikolai, Kennedy has gotten a lot better at defending a lot of those entries.
And I think that's why I will end up predicting him in this fight. I think this is a very fun co-main event. For all those Carlos Felipe versus unranked heavyweight X ones, I know these two guys might not be the biggest names in the world, but I really do think entertainment-wise, this fight's going to deliver. But I do have Kennedy in the matchup.
But if you remember that Darko Stosic fight, the reason that Nzechukwu won that one was because of multiple cup checks and points taken away. And for Ion Cutelaba, he doesn't really throw kicks to the body like that. And he doesn't throw those kicks in and around the groinal area.
He's not as active as Darko, though.
No, he's not like that. But with his striking, with his takedowns, he is a lot more active. So for those reasons, I like Cutelaba in the matchup, and I like how threatening he can be once the fight touches the mat. So I'm going to go with the underdog in the matchup with Ion Cutelaba. Matt going with Kennedy Nzechukwu to get the win in this matchup. This should be a great fight, and I can't wait to hear from the folks in the comments on this one. Please let us know down below who you have in this matchup. Can't wait for this one on Saturday. The main event, Derrick Lewis, Sergey Spivak. We're almost there, folks. Tune in for that one. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.